Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. Game week 4 is shaping up as a pretty decent game week to look at playing your free hit, and I am highly considering doing it myself. So in today's video, I'm going to take a look at our first free hit draft ahead of game week 4. Welcome back to another video on my channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at my first free hit draft ahead of game week 4. I haven't pressed the buttons yet, and I did actually have a very good game week 3 where I rose from about 5.4 million to 2.4, so a positive week, but it didn't come without issues. Saar is potentially out for a little while in my team. I've also got Strand Larsen, who's a doubt, and I've only got one free transfer to deal with it, mainly because I had an issue with Cole Palmer the previous week. So there are injuries hanging around, and a lot of managers like myself don't seem to have many free transfers to attack what is a pretty decent upside game week 4, where we've got 3 or 4 teams, in particular Liverpool, Arsenal, Crystal Palace, Newcastle, maybe even Man City in there as well, who all have very good fixtures, but not many of us have a ton of coverage in all of those sides. So it does seem like a free hit could be a nice way of alleviating that and getting back on the front foot and maybe putting off a couple of transfers next week where some players might come back from injury as well. Meanwhile, you can chase the upside for this game week. If you did enjoy today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future content. And with that, let's move on to my goalkeeper and defense all at once. And I'll start off by dragging across the Solio Analytics live market odds for clean sheets going into game week 4. Now, what you can see here is that I've really focused on the top 4 defenses for the clean sheet odds when looking at my goalkeeper and my defensive line. I've also gone with 4 at the back rather than 3 because, number one, there are a lot of good defenses to be targeting this week with good clean sheet odds. And also, as a bit of a meta point, defenders do seem to be boosted somewhat by the addition of DEFCON this season. So defenders are amongst the highest scoring players in the league right now in terms of FPL points. And I can see that continuing over the next few weeks, given the fact that clean sheets seem to be on the rise and the defensive contributions are bolstering them somewhat. They're also very good value for money in comparison to some of the more expensive players in the forward and midfield lines. So defenders do seem to be back to their best and somewhat part of the meta conversation this year. Looking at my goalkeeper in particular, I do want some Newcastle coverage. I was a little bit tempted to go with double Newcastle defense, so Nick Pope with a Schär or a Livramento or a Dan Burn, but given that there are a few other defenses I wanted to target, Newcastle, I wasn't completely convinced I wanted to double up. There was a different strategy looking at 5 at the back with Schär in there as well, but that seemed maybe a little bit strong on the defense, and it was sacrificing maybe a little bit too much in either my midfield or forward line. So I've gone with Nick Pope to cover off the Newcastle clean sheet. And the Newcastle clean sheet odds are amongst the best for game week 4. It's also worth noting that they are the best defensively this season in terms of XGC conceded in the entire league, despite playing Liverpool in that game week 2 fixture as well. So that does go to show that they are a very tight defense. They also go up against what is so far the worst attack in the league in terms of XG created, that being Wolves. So I think it is important to get some Newcastle coverage on the clean sheet there. Moving into my back line, I have gone with double Crystal Palace. They've looked good defensively so far. And another thing to consider on a free hit is, even though they've got a good fixture and I would want to target their attack, if Saar is a doubt, which he seems to be, and the fact that they've just lost Eze as well, do I want to be going aggressive on their attack, or would I prefer to play it a little bit safer on their defense? And I think, considering that they've got a number of defenders that are all very good for different routes to points, I'd like to double up on the defense. So Munoz is amongst one of the best defenders in the game, especially for this week. At 5.5 million, I still think he's fantastic value. And not only does he offer the odds of the clean sheet being pretty high this week, but he's also got plenty of attacking promise. He even played almost centre forward in the last 20 or so minutes in game week 3. So I really like the look of him. He would be completely locked on a free hit for me going into game week 4. And alongside him, I've also gone with Lacroix. Now that could easily be Richards if you don't quite have the money for this. It's only a 0.5 difference, but it could make all the difference in affording this draft. But I think if you can, I'd go with Lacroix because he's got slightly better odds of hitting those DEFCON thresholds. And he's been an absolute monster so far this season. He does very regularly get that 2-point extra bonus. Plus, you've got the clean sheet odds. And actually, when you look at the data from the last couple of seasons, he's got pretty good attacking threat from set pieces as well, running at about 0.1 XG per 90, which is about a goal in every 10 games on average. So I do want to double up on the Crystal Palace defence there, but Gahey and Richards are both good options or alternatives as well if you needed the funds. I've also got coverage of both Liverpool and Arsenal. I haven't gone with double defence on either because I like some of the options in attack, especially with Liverpool, but I don't want to leave myself exposed to the clean sheets getting locked in against Nottingham Forest at home for Arsenal, where, again, as you've seen, good odds of a clean sheet happening there, and Liverpool away at Burnley as well. I'm also not bullish enough on either of those defences to go double up, because I can see a world in which Nottingham Forest cause Arsenal some problems. And I can also see a world in which Burnley cause some problems against Liverpool, who haven't looked quite as tight generally across the season so far. Obviously, they did very well in a cagey game against Arsenal, though. So I've gone with single defenders on both of those. Van Dijk's got a good amount of chance of hitting DEFCON. Gabriel, very low opportunity, but he's got much better goal threat. So with all of these defenders, I've got some sort of other routes to points other than clean sheets, but also the clean sheet odds are very good as well. So I put Rodon on my bench and Dubravka as well. I haven't really mentioned either of them, just 4.0 goalkeeper and defender, just so I can afford the rest of the draft. I would be very surprised if I needed to lean on either of them in game week 4, considering I'm on a free hit. But Rodon has himself been pretty good value for money this season, and has Fulham, who don't score a ton of goals either. Let's move on to my midfield, and where most of my money is starting to be spent in my midfield and forward lines. Okay, so moving into the midfield, and I am currently running with a Salah draft rather than an Erling Haaland draft going into free hit game week 4. But do tune in to the end of the video if you prefer the Haaland draft, because I'm not a million miles off of preferring that. And I thought it'd only be fair to show you the version of this draft with a couple of tweaks that could enable Erling Haaland instead of Mo Salah if you preferred Haaland as a captaincy option this game week and you wanted to attack that Man United home fixture. Haaland is also in probably much better form than Salah, so I can completely understand the logic for going with Haaland on a free hit. I do still marginally prefer Salah. He's been a bit off of it so far. He's been playing quite wide, not as involved, and his touch has been a little bit off in the final third. But all of that being said, he's still been getting 90 minutes. He hasn't been given a penalty yet, so that can still come into it. And he's still managed 2 attacking returns in the opening 3 game weeks, in which he's played Arsenal and Newcastle, 2 of the toughest defences in the league. So I still have enough faith in Mo Salah to be going with him against Burnley away on a free hit. And I do think it would be risky to go without. So Salah is still in for me. But if you are more of a risk taker and you're more bullish on Salah being off of it this season, then Haaland might be the way to go. And you could look at the end of this video where I've got a version of this draft involving Erling Haaland. One thing I would say is I probably wouldn't go with both. Every draft I've made with both Salah and Haaland sacrifices one too many of the other big hitters in my team, and it leaves me almost inevitably with one Liverpool or one Arsenal overall, or just one short in either direction. So I think for me, going with both is just a little bit too much money allocated into 2 positions, and at the end of the day, you can only captain one of them. If you had them over a longer stretch where you captain one week and you captain one another, it works a little bit better. But in one game week where you can only captain one, I think you almost have to put your eggs in one basket there and spread the funds elsewhere to maximize the benefit. Haaland's going to be fantastic this week, as is Salah most likely. So I pick one or the other, spread the funds, and you'll get a little bit more bang for your buck across your 11, rather than just optimizing 2 positions where you can only captain one of them. So moving past Salah, I've explained why I still think he's a good option against Burnley, but Burnley are a pretty bad defense. Obviously, in the Championship, we're very good, but they're amongst the worst in the league so far, which is not a surprise whatsoever. Liverpool haven't been a great attack so far if you look at the data, but they've still managed to score plenty of goals, and they've had a tough run of fixtures. So I'm still bullish enough on Liverpool attack going into Burnley away. It is Burnley away at the end of the day as well. Let's not forget that. It's a fixture that should be targeted. Speaking of, Gakpo also makes it in. I was toying around with Wirtz instead of Gakpo, but the reason I've gone with Gakpo is it makes this draft affordable. That's point one. And that extra bit of money would mean that I'd have to downgrade elsewhere if I went with Wirtz over Gakpo. But also, Gakpo has looked a little bit better for attacking threat. He's gotten 3 returns so far. Wirtz has got none. And Gakpo's minutes, up until now, have been very secure, been getting 90 plus minutes in every single match. And again, it is Burnley. So I do fancy him for some attacking returns. It is worth noting that with Isak signing, I do expect over the long term Gakpo's minutes to take a little bit of a dive, because I see Ekitike probably sharing with Isak more than anything else, but then also Ekitike might share a little bit with Cody Gakpo off the left-hand side. So I think over a stretch of fixtures, Gakpo's minutes do take a bit of a dive. But in game week 4, after Isak hasn't had much of a pre-season, I still think that Gakpo gets good enough minutes to secure himself a couple of attacking returns against Burnley. So I would still be fairly bullish in going with Gakpo on a free hit right now. Less so on Ekitike, as you'll see in a minute. And of course, I've already got triple Liverpool here. Ekitike, I was very tempted to put in, but the reason I've gone with Gakpo over him is because I think Isak more directly affects Ekitike's minutes. And I can't see a universe in which Isak doesn't get any minutes in game week 4 against Burnley. I think it's unlikely he starts, and Ekitike probably will, but I can absolutely see a 60 to 70th minute sub for Ekitike, whereas Gakpo, I could see him staying on the pitch a little bit longer. So that's the logic behind that. Moving across to Semenyo, my final midfielder, this could have very easily been a Newcastle midfielder, Elanga or Barnes. It could have also been Reinders, who is currently on my bench right now, who I also quite like for this week. It could have also arguably been someone like an Eberechi Eze or a Paqueta over at West Ham, or even a Jorginho. There's lots of different options in that third midfielder spot that I like. But the reason I want Semenyo is I want to maximise upside on a free hit. And although Brighton aren't a bad defence, it's more to do with Semenyo's form so far this season. He's been fantastic. And his shot volume generally over the last couple of seasons has been amongst the very best in the entire league, which means if he can get 4 or 5 shots away a game, it just ups the potential upside on a free hit, where if he can net 1 or 2 of them, you could be looking at a massive haul. So I'm taking a bit of a high upside punt there, but I do like Semenyo on a free hit at home to Brighton. He's been electric. Bournemouth have been very good, and the shot volume is very high. Barnes and Elanga would come in a close second for me. The reason I haven't gone with them is because Howe, as we've seen now, is able to change the formation, and it makes them just a little bit less locked in to the starting 11. And also they could come off at any minute as well. So Elanga, in particular for Murphy, could get reduced minutes. Barnes, I thought he was absolutely nailed in whilst Gordon wasn't there. But as we saw in game week 3, that's not actually the case. He can still come off the bench if they play a different formation. And now they've signed both Wissa and Voltemada. There are other opportunities in different formations that can be played as well. So I like Barnes a lot. Probably prefer him over Elanga very slightly, but it's just that little bit of risk that they might be playing a 5 at the back and do something a little bit funky that puts me off ever so slightly. So that's my midfield 3. As you can see on the bench, I've gone with King as that 4.5 enabler against Leeds at home. Don't expect to be playing him. And Reinders very nearly made it into my starting 11, but his actual XGI per 90 has been pretty low so far. It's a very good fixture at home to Man United, and I do expect him to bully that midfield, but he doesn't quite get in over the goal threat that the first 3 that I've picked on my free hit provide. So moving into my forward line, and I thought I'd start off by mentioning the forwards that haven't quite made the cut, because honestly, there are 5 or 6 forwards that I'd very happily pick on a free hit, and it was a really tough choice picking the 3 that I've landed on for this draft. Obviously, I'll do more thinking throughout the week, so do tune in to future videos. However, the players that haven't quite made it, the Newcastle forwards, Wissa and Voltemada, very excited by a Newcastle forward, but I'm not completely confident which one starts from the off. I think Wissa is probably the more likely, considering he's got Premier League experience, but neither of them look absolutely locked in to start game week 4. If I was completely certain, one of them would be in, because that's a great fixture against Wolves. Defensively, Wolves have been pretty shoddy, and obviously Newcastle are a very good attack with good odds of scoring a high amount of goals goals. I'll pull over the Solio Analytics data for the attacking threat for game week 4 via the market odds now. As you can see, Newcastle rank very highly. And if I knew which player was going to start up top, I'd want one of them. But I don't know for certain which one it's going to be. So I can't confidently pick them over some of the more nailed options that I've gone with, especially considering, again, referencing Solio's market odds. The 3 teams that I'm covering off in my forward line also all have good odds of scoring a high amount of goals as well. So no room for Newcastle at the end for me right now. But if I was confident in one of them starting and getting good minutes, then I might be tempted to go there. I also haven't had any space for Ekitike here. Obviously, I'm tripled up on Liverpool. I mentioned earlier that I just get a feeling that Isak gets some minutes from him. And I can absolutely see Isak getting 20 or 30 minutes considering he's playing over the international break. So he will have some match fitness. With that in mind, Ekitike is likely to come off early if he does start. I think it's very likely he does. And of course, he also doesn't have penalties to benefit from either. So it just puts him slightly below some of the options I've picked here. I've already talked about Erling Haaland. I love him for this game week, and I think he's the best forward to own. But that price point makes it very difficult to have both Salah and Haaland and a balanced 11. And as I mentioned earlier on, I just think the amount of sacrifices you have to make to fit in both of them just means that considering you can only captain one of them, you've got a weaker 11 overall. And I probably would have to go without one or two of the other Liverpool players I've got, or take out another Arsenal player. So it just leaves me a little bit exposed to other fixtures. That being said, I love Erling Haaland for this week. And if you preferred Erling Haaland, wait another couple of minutes and I've got an Erling Haaland version of this draft instead of a Salah draft. The forwards I have gone with are Mateta, Gyökeres and João Pedro. João Pedro was maybe the one that I was least confident on, but I think considering Palmer, we still don't know whether he's back, and now Delap's out for an extended period too, João Pedro's minutes look about as good as they're ever going to be. And of course, he's in the form of his career right now. So with all of those things and the fact that he's got very high ownership going into game week 4, all in mind, I think it's very hard to go without him even on a free hit, because I think the amount of punishment he could deal you if you go against him might not be worth the risk, considering a free hit you want to maximize upside. I can just see him scoring a lot of points against Brentford as well. It's a good fixture. Brentford haven't looked tight at the back whatsoever so far this season. And Chelsea have got the best XG in the league so far. João Pedro being a large part of that too. Everything's pointing towards more João Pedro points. The minutes look good. And although he doesn't have penalties, I can still see him feasting in game week 4. So he is still in for me, even on a free hit. Now, moving across to the other two strikers, I have gone with Mateta. I would like some Palace attack. Arguably, Munoz counts as an attacker for Palace as well. But considering Mateta's on penalties, getting very good minutes at the moment as well, and playing a promoted club at home, I think just it ticks all of the boxes I'd want in a striker. And on a free hit, it seems too good to pass up for me personally. But some people are saying he doesn't look as involved in the Palace open play attacks as maybe we're used to. So I can see an argument to maybe back against it. But considering the buts about all of the other forwards I've talked about, I think Mateta still probably gets in ahead of them at time of recording. So for me, he's all good. Even with a slightly weakened attack with Eze now gone and Sarr potentially injured, I still think Mateta's going to get enough service and enough routes to points with penalties included there that he is a good pick going into game week 4. Gyökeres is the final one. Now, he's been very up and down in the first few game weeks. It looks like he's going to be a bit of a flat track bully. Obviously, hauled against Leeds, blanked in the other two fixtures with stronger opposition, obviously Liverpool and Man United in there. So I think he's going to be a feast or famine kind of striker. But as long as Saka's out, he looks very likely to be the penalty taker. And Nottingham Forest at home looks like a good fixture this season. Forest defence has fallen off very dramatically for the first few weeks and towards the back end of last season as well. They're playing at the Emirates. He should get 80 to 90 minutes, you'd think. And it seems to me like a fixture where we could be looking at a decent amount of goals for Arsenal. Again, I'll reference the Solio Analytics data I mentioned earlier there. So Gyökeres on penalties, routes to points there, very good, and good minutes against a team that have struggled defensively. That is absolutely fine for me. And although he struggled in parts this season, he's still a quality Premier League striker that I expect to do well against the opponents where maybe they're not quite as strong defensively as a Liverpool, for example. So that's my free hit 11 at the moment. But as I mentioned, I also have a version of this which removes Salah, but gets to Haaland, and I'd be captaining Haaland instead if you weren't quite as keen on a Salah draft. Okay, so as promised, I'll wrap up with a Haaland version of this draft. Just 2 changes here, so very minor, won't spend too long on it. But what you can do, if you're not as convinced on Mo Salah, is downgrade that spot to Wirtz instead, or if you didn't fancy Wirtz because he's been off to a pretty ropey start himself, you could look at someone like a Harvey Barnes or an Elanga, or bring Reinders into the starting 11, bench someone like a Paqueta, for instance. There are lots of different combinations you could use in that midfield, but it would have to be someone under 9 million, of course, to make this affordable. I've gone with Wirtz just to make sure that I've got triple Liverpool, and actually against Burnley, I still think Wirtz is going to be pretty good. His minutes look relatively secure, and I actually think he looked a little bit better towards the end of the Arsenal game. So I back him to do well against a promoted side. I think that's absolutely fine. And of course, in my forward line, what I've done with the Salah down to Wirtz money is upgraded Gyökeres up to Haaland. That could have been any of the 3 strikers, by the way, but I've gone with Gyökeres because it means that I can go with Wirtz in midfield, because otherwise I'd need a little bit extra money to upgrade a João Pedro or a Mateta. So I've gone with Haaland. Obviously, Man United at home, good odds of a strong amount of goals there, and Haaland is taking up a massive amount of the goal share for Man City right now. He's also got by far the highest XG in the league, the most shots in the league, and actually he as a single player is beating, I think, about 50% of the teams for non-penalty XG so far this season. So a very good player to be going with. I think it's, for me, one of Haaland or Salah because of what it does to your entire 11 if you go with both. And like I said, you can only captain one of them, but if you are more bullish on Haaland at home to Man United than you are on Salah away at Burnley, which is perfectly fine, that's perfectly logical as well, then I quite like this draft as an alternative. Let me know in the comments below which of those 2 drafts you prefer, and of course, if there are any players I haven't mentioned today, do drop them in the comments below and we can have a chat about them ahead of potentially free hitting in Game Week 4. In the meantime, if you did enjoy today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time as I maybe start looking at pressing some buttons ahead of Game Week 4.